So picture this. It's August 10th, 2025, and the clock just hit 3:25 in the afternoon. Down in some underground bunker in Kherson, a bunch of Russian commanders are having their little meeting, planning their next move. They're feeling pretty good about themselves, thinking they're all safe and sound tucked away underground like that. Meanwhile, up on the surface, there's this F-16 getting ready to take off from the runway, and nobody down below has a clue what's coming. The meeting's going along just fine. Everyone's chatting away, and their systems aren't picking up anything suspicious. Not a single red flag. But here's the thing these guys didn't know. The Ukrainian army had been watching this place like hawks for months. I'm talking full surveillance mode. They'd mapped out every single antenna, figured out all the communication points, tracked the entry and exit routes, even knew where they got their supplies. These Russian commanders had no idea they'd been made. And get this, in just a few minutes, one F-16 was about to drop two massive 454-kilogram JDAM ER bombs right on top of where all 25 of these high-ranking Russian officials were sitting around their table. But this wasn't just some quick hit-and-run job. This mission required the pilot to fly super low, making these incredibly precise course corrections to stay off the radar, trying to find just the right window to attack without getting spotted by Russian air defenses, and then doing this crazy pop-up climb at exactly the right moment. Right when things were getting critical, the F-16's flight plan had it positioned about 68 kilometers east of that underground command center in Kherson. The Ukrainian Air Force was locked and loaded, ready to go. They'd assigned just one F-16 to this whole operation. No backup, no escort, just this one fighter jet. The only support they had was some decoy drones and surveillance drones, and everything had to work together like clockwork. The F-16 was operating from this mobile base, nothing fancy, just an auxiliary runway that would do the job. By 2:57 p.m., they'd finished all the pre-takeoff preparations. They loaded up two GBU 62 JDAM ERs onto the wing stations right there on the mobile runway, set up a delayed fuse in the tail, and stuck a chaff pod under the fuselage. They left two AIM-120s on the wingtips and attached this AN/ALR 56M threat warning receiver and an ALE-50 tow decoy cassette to the fuselage lines. To make sure they had enough range and could climb safely, they added two 370-gallon external tanks. On the tech side, they loaded up all the WGS-84 coordinates, programmed the GPS-INS guidance for the bombs, and set all the toss swing parameters. The pilot got briefed again on why flying super low was absolutely critical for this mission. Orders were clear: stay between 50 and 60 meters altitude. Why so low? Well, radar has this thing called a horizon limit based on line of sight. When you're flying that low, even those powerful S-300/400 radars can only realistically detect you from about 25 to 30 kilometers away over flat ground because of how the Earth curves. The plan was, if the F-16 could stay undetected until it got within the JDAM ER's standoff range, it could handle that brief moment when the radar finally lit up by using a combo of jamming, maneuvering, and decoys. Basically, it could even slip past S-400 radars. At 3:03 p.m., the afterburner kicked in, the aircraft took off, gear came up, and the pilot dropped down to that 50 to 60 meter sweet spot, flying what they call a nap of the Earth profile on the first leg. But don't think this was some easy game of hide and seek. Flying that low means the flight computer has to constantly balance wing load and thrust with every little bump and vibration. Plus, there's always the risk of sucking in debris that could mess up the engine compressor. That's exactly why they'd planned the route through this clean corridor they'd mapped out from previous satellite passes. Surveillance drones were already up above the secure side of the border, keeping an eye on what was happening at the facility. The antenna was doing its usual rotation. Service doors were opening and closing. All signs pointing to a meeting going on inside. But here's the thing. The trickiest part of this whole plan wasn't the approach. The real nail-biter was that pop-up climb they'd need to do so the bombs could get enough range, because that's when the aircraft would pop above the radar horizon and those Russian radar beams would definitely try to lock on. At 3:18 p.m., they activated the decoy package. Several mini UAVs started broadcasting these random false signals with low radar cross-section, basically cluttering up the radar displays, while a few others just left optical traces to add noise to the detection system. The whole point was to mess with the radar operator's head, make them wonder, where is that F-16? For just a few crucial seconds. Exactly at 3:21 p.m., the ALR 56M started screaming. First paint warning. Radar illumination was coming from the northeast. The pilot immediately went into this beam maneuver, flying at a right angle to the radar to make it harder for the Doppler to discriminate. The ALQ-131 started pumping out broadband noise, but sure enough, the threat escalated just like they expected. SAM launch warning came through. The pilot released the ALE-50 tow decoy, backed off the speed a bit, and increased the turn radius to mess with the missile's lead calculation. A few seconds later, that missile chasing the decoy target just fizzled out at long range. That first defensive attempt missed, which was actually good news for the attacker. It meant it was time to pop up, because after this failed shot, that radar operator was going to reacquire the target and open up a second firing window. At 3:22 p.m., the F-16 pulled up at a 35 to 40 degree angle, climbing to about 2,000 meters. This climb was all about energizing the wing kit that would give the JDAM ERs their range. The higher and faster those bombs separated, the further they could glide in the standoff phase, which pushed the release point back several kilometers and cut down the risk of getting into the line of sight and taking a hit. They'd set the delayed fuse on the JDAM ER munitions for 1.1 seconds. Each one of these things packs serious punch with its 454-kilogram steel body. JDAM is this system that combines tail guidance with an ER wing kit. The INS/GPS combo in the tail keeps the bomb on course based on inertia even if they're jamming the GPS, while the wings carry it forward like a glider. In the final phase, that delayed fuse goes off at just the right depth underground, taking into account the altitude and approach speed. Why the delay? Because they were hitting an underground command center. The explosion needed to happen deep enough to penetrate the ventilation shaft and suddenly compress all that air trapped inside, which would make the top plate collapse. The internal corridors would get knocked down by the shock wave, and the electrical and ventilation systems would get taken out all at once. For the defenders, it would just look like a small hole on the surface, but inside it would be total chaos. For the attackers, it was taking out multiple critical functions with one shot. Meanwhile, those Russian commanders underground were just carrying on with their meeting, completely oblivious. The secret underground headquarters where they were sitting was built with this 3-level bunker gallery system. The stuff you could see on the surface was just for show. The communication antennas were hanging down from the surface and were totally vulnerable to analysis. As the first JDAM ER separated, the INS reference locked on and the GPS stayed active. The second bomb got fired just milliseconds later. The aircraft immediately nosedived with half a ton of fuel still on board, glided back down into that 50 to 60 meter band and started heading for the exit route. Ukrainian intelligence had been tracking these signals for weeks. They'd matched up satellite imagery with movement analysis and used signal analysis to figure out when meetings were happening. This F-16 mission was built entirely around this intelligence. The targeting pod acquired the target in the terminal phase, and the window for action was down to just a few seconds. After the JDAM ER got released, it switched to independent glide mode. The wing deployment command went out within seconds. GPS correction synced up with the mission computer. The munition came in at a 40-degree angle toward the roof block. Then impact happened on the surface after all these processes ran their course. The penetrating warhead slammed into the concrete block of that secret underground facility where the Russian commanders were meeting. At 3:27 p.m., the first bomb hit within meters of the facility's main ventilation shaft. The explosion went off right at the center of the gallery system, and the facility's pressure chambers just collapsed. At the time of the attack, like I mentioned, there were 25 active Russian military personnel inside, including the battalion commander and chief of staff, 3 ammunition officers, and 2 planning officers who were all at this meeting. The first explosion scattered everything along the center line, delivering that initial shock to the Russian commanders. The second bomb, which showed up seconds later, basically sealed the deal on how everything was going to end inside that underground facility. This explosion brought down the ground floor, broke the support columns inside, and knocked out the electrical system. There wasn't any fire, but the walls collapsed from the pressure. Those high-ranking Russian military guys couldn't get out. They didn't have time, and everything was just chaos. The second gallery inside the structure completely collapsed. The pressure from the upper floors cracked the ground block. 3 of the ground support columns got knocked loose, and the interior walls were just shattered. Furniture, consoles, tactical maps, everything got destroyed. The headquarters room collapsed inward, swallowing up the lower level. Those Russian officers got hit directly by the internal pressure. Physical losses got reported as 25. This basically signaled the collapse of the Russian high-ranking military command structure in Kherson. There was no way to evacuate anyone. The F-16 switched to low maneuvering mode just 6 seconds after release. The radar signature got suppressed by the ground surface. The aircraft made it back to the mobile runway in 17 minutes flat. Nobody tracked it. The targeting pod images got transferred to backup systems, and the pilot broke radio silence after the mission was done. They didn't even need to activate the electronic warfare system. No rearming happened after the mission either. After finishing the job, that F-16 just returned to its takeoff area. Losing that secret underground headquarters created this massive domino effect on the Kherson front line. Forward position planning got shut down for 8 hours. Artillery fire got delayed. The supply headquarters couldn't give approval for anything. Engineering work got suspended. Drone flight permits got suspended. Without new orders, Russian troops just sat there doing nothing. They couldn't make relocation decisions. Transport orders got frozen. Without a command center, the whole line just stopped functioning. You really can't overlook how specific those bombs were that the F-16s used to pull all this off. JDAM ER munitions create this strategic impact in targeted missions. The penetrating warhead is designed to destroy things from the inside rather than just making surface damage. The wing structure gives it extended range. GPS-guided flight gets backed up by an inertial system so it can hit the target without any deviation. It works in perfect sync with the targeting pod image. That delayed fuse creates an explosion inside the enclosed space, keeping the pressure contained, and the wave energy gets fragmented on the concrete walls, which increases personnel casualties. Of course, the defender has options against this kind of attack. Deeper shelters, more shafts, backup power, more frequent radar sweeps, and thicker close-in air defense. But every single reinforcement creates a new weak point somewhere. Ventilation always has to face outward. Power has to surface somewhere. Fiber connections have to link to the outside world at some point. The attacker finds that weak link and destroys it with the right geometry and timing. But let's be real here. This whole scheme isn't foolproof. Bad wind, weak GPS signals, incorrect terrain data, faulty missile timing, or losing the tracking drone can all make the same attack fail completely. What works today might not work as easily tomorrow. The attacker has to compensate for this with backup targets, backup routes, and backup jamming capabilities. The bottom line of this whole operation was cutting off a battalion's decision-making and supply chain right in the middle of the day. With headquarters gone, the flow of orders to the front line just stopped. Instructions that had been given to frontline units didn't get completed. Forward bases went into standby mode. Artillery units couldn't get target information. The minefield control program got suspended. Armored units were sitting around waiting for permission to move. Drone reconnaissance flights got delayed. The communication line couldn't transfer to the backup system. This gap lasted for 72 hours, and during that same time, Ukraine was putting pressure on 8 different fronts. The Russian side just couldn't respond right away to losing their headquarters. The backup personnel weren't ready, they couldn't establish a new chain of command, the secondary headquarters was too far away, data had to get transferred manually, the coordination period got stretched out, communication frequencies got all mixed up, and frontline units fell into complete chaos. They were sending double orders to the same targets, some batteries couldn't fire at all. The F-16 created all this chaos with just one shot. The aircraft was only on a 20-minute mission and used a single munition. Ukraine made this mission model their standard approach. The F-16 took off from a mobile runway instead of a fixed base, changed its landing point during the mission, and didn't stay on the runway for more than 15 minutes. 6 hours after the attack, the intelligence report got entered into the system. Satellite images confirmed the destruction in 14 different frames. The images showed that the central building was completely destroyed. The diameter of the hole matched the munition exactly. They identified the JDAM ER profile in the trace analysis, measured the fuse timing at 1.1 seconds, and found the blast depth was 3.2 meters. The target had collapsed from the inside out. Field reports from that same day confirmed the list of 25 casualties, including 2 colonels, 4 lieutenant colonels, and 3 engineering chiefs. These reports just reinforced the verification of the F-16 mission's success. F-16 missions became this huge deterrent factor after that. The flights weren't visible, but the impact was crystal clear. Radar systems failed to respond, electronic warfare capacity wasn't enough. Ukraine had disabled the whole system with a single shot. Missions got completed quickly, and post-attack tracking was impossible. No trace, no route, no signal, just destruction. This created serious psychological pressure. On the Russian side, headquarters discipline completely changed. New structures got pulled back deeper. Decision-making processes got longer. Fewer officers were visiting the field, and concealment became the top priority. This weakened their coordination, increased communication times, slowed down reaction times, and overall, their defense reflexes decreased. This all worked in Ukraine's favor. JDAM ER munitions created this fear effect in the field once again. A single bomb scattered an entire battalion. They couldn't identify the target, couldn't develop countermeasures, couldn't follow the trail, and radar couldn't detect it. The targeting pod provided the solution. The shot got fired without delay, accuracy was 100%, and the tactical success was complete. Ukraine redesigned their F-16 mission structure after this attack. They increased the number of mobile bases, duplicated fuel supply lines, gave the pod system software updates, made the mission computer produce solutions faster, renewed pilot training according to tactical scenarios, extended radar signature suppression time, synchronized targeting systems, optimized ammunition firing delay, shortened mission duration, and resolved signal interference in new missions with additional measures. They activated the jammer system, reduced noise frequency, accelerated pod data transfer, reduced targeting time to 1.3 seconds, improved delayed fuse sensitivity, increased heat dispersion, reduced GPS deviation, narrowed the accuracy range, and increased ammunition reliability. In short, by firing JDAMs from F-16 fighter jets, the Ukrainian Air Force had broken not only the Russian military's secret underground facility in Kherson, but also the backbone of the Kremlin itself. Thanks for listening.